So hello Millie, more cat for you. So I just wanted to talk about Glenn Maxwell and what's going on with him. And I think that when we talk about him, we have to talk about the general idea of how they're going about selections. So part of this is probably to do with Greg Chappell, who is sort of his philosophy of selections is that he knows better than everybody else. It's kind of a Daryl Hare, remember the umpire, Daryl Hare sort of attitude, which is that some people think of them both as geniuses for not following any rules or any general logic, but for instead making it up as they go along. And most people, though, think that they're complete, against going against just about everything. So Greg Chappell, being a part of the selection committee, I'm blaming him. I don't know if it's actually true, but I'm going to say there's a good chance that his influence is why we're having these strange selections. So basically, to understand this, generally speaking, we are selecting players on merit. Now, occasionally we have a good hunch about someone and we put them in on a hunch. So if you might know, during our what we call the good stage, the glory days for Australia, we're talking roughly between about 1989 and 2008. Now, depending on who you ask, it's between 1995 and 2004 or whatever, but it's in that vague range. And in that time, we did have a few hunches. So one of those hunches was a guy called Michael Clark. So he was under 19, Australian under 19 captain. Wasn't doing particularly well at first class level. I think he was averaging about 38, which at the time was pretty low for a batsman. So there was others that were averaging 50 and more than 50, and he got in when he was averaging 38, just because they thought he had a good technique. They thought he would be able to handle it at the bigger time, and it worked. He ended up averaging, I think he got to 50 in tests. That was close to it. Now another hunch that worked was Andrew Symonds. Sort of worked, didn't completely work, but Andrew Symonds was another one. He had pretty bad record at first class level. I think he was averaging about 35, might have even been less than 35 with the bat, and around about 40-45 with the ball at first class level, which is not all-rounder level. It's not batsman level, it's not bowler level. And he was given tests, he was given one-day internationals, and because he bowled right and left armed, spin and pace, and he batted as well, and he was a good fielder. He did everything. So that was why he was given a shot. So those two were hunches during our glory days that worked out. So if you're talking about do hunches ever work? Yeah, they do sometimes. And another hunch we can think of was Steve Waugh. So when Steve Waugh was first picked, he was not doing very well. His brother, identical twin brother, who was pretty much doing exactly the same, was not picked. Steve Waugh was picked, absolute hunch, just because somebody liked the way he looked. And I mean, they do that sometimes. Another one was Glenn McGrath. He didn't really have anything going for him. They liked the way he bowled. But of course, Glenn McGrath wasn't a big hunch because he played one-day internationals first. And when you play one-day internationals first, you're not taking a big risk. So whose name was Shane Warne? Shane Warne was just thrown into the test team, and because they're like, oh, a leg spinner. But then he was given a lot of good training, and they nearly dumped him. Yeah. So they're hunches that worked out there. Now, in amongst those few hunches, we had a lot of people that really deserved it. And obviously you got your Adam Gilchrist. Ian Healy was a bit of a hunch, but Adam Gilchrist certainly deserved it. You got your Matthew Haydens, definitely deserved it. Justin Langer, Darren Lehman, Ricky Ponting, all players that put in the hard work, got good results, and got there. Now, the problem is that at the moment, we're kind of going the other way around. Now, some people say, oh, well, we've got lower batting averages. Yeah, but it's not about whether you average 50 or whether you average 40. It's more about whether your record is better than someone else's record. And it's about whether, and yeah, they've got to take into account whether you're in form right now as well. But you shouldn't be picking players that average 30 overall and, oh, they're in form because they average 40 this season. No, no. So we'll look at the current team. So, and in this respect, I'm just going to imagine that we're 3 months in the future when those bans have expired. So who out of that has earned their spot? Who was picked genuinely and who was picked on a hunch? So Nathan Lyon was picked on a hunch. Tim Payne was picked on a hunch. Pat Cummins was pretty much a hunch when he was first picked. And then we've got the genuine picks were Stark and Hazelwood and Smith and Warner. There was nothing hunchy about those picks. So we've got 4 players. Now, you can say, well, Pat Cummins worked out pretty well. He had a few problems for a few years, mainly because of injury, but he's overall he's worked out. Nathan Lyon, he, again, struggled for a while, but got there. And Tim Payne, well, I mean, that was a good hunch. I don't know that it's a long-term hunch, but it's a good hunch. Like, I'm talking about the recent one. Although, since the original pick was a bit of a hunch too. So, then we look at the batsmen that we're looking at now. Now, we've picked a bunch of people in the Sri Lankan team, and I've gone over that. Joe Burns, Matthew Renshaw, and Usman Khawaja are not hunches. They're genuine picks. And the new guy, Will Puchalski, is not a hunch. Genuine pick. You might say it's a bit premature, but he's certainly done the hard yards. Got some big scores. And if you're just counting the first class scores, he got a 243, I think it was, and then a 188. So they're 2 big scores in a short period of time. Plus he got a number of half centuries. And then the ones we're not allowed to count are in the under 23 levels. Now that's a lower level, but it's not much lower level. And he got double centuries there too. He got a double century there and another big century and a number of 50s. And so what we're basically saying is that if we've got to count them, he's in really, really, really good form. Now, the reason why I mention them is because when you sort of think, oh, well, I mean, and I look back at Cameron Bancroft, for example, when he was picked, he had 2 good scores, yes, but he had nothing anywhere. But if you have 2 good scores at first class level, but you have 5 more at under 23 levels or under 19 level or whatever level it is, it's just below that level, even if it's one day domestic or whatever it is, then you know that that's genuine form. And that's what we've got with Puchalski. Well, I might be saying his name wrong. So that's a genuine pick. Now Glenn Maxwell, again, he's not picked, but he would be a genuine pick. Marnus Labuschagne is not a genuine pick. Now Marcus Harris is a funny one because Puchalski got 243 and then got concussion, mental health, whatever, and then Marcus Harris came in, replacing him in the side essentially, and Harris got 250, pretty much the next match. So if Puchalski had not had his concussion, his mental health issues, whatever they might have been, and we're not being told what they are, so let's just respect that. But if that hadn't happened, Harris wouldn't have been in the Victorian team, and then Harris wouldn't have been in the Australian team. Now, that's an interesting thing. We would have had Puchalski perhaps in the Ashes, not Ashes, in the Manchester series against India, and then we wouldn't have been worried about it. So the other thing is, why is Glenn Maxwell not being considered? A lot of people saying, well, he's a one-day player. He's not. I mean, look at his stats. Most people say, oh, well, he averages 26 with the bat and 40 with the ball at test level. Now, he had 7 tests. So 7 tests, not a big amount to make the sort of statement. But the other thing is, some tests play out a bit differently to others. And he's always, just about every test, he's done something. He hasn't had failures. So people looking at those numbers are not sort of realising what he's done. And it's similar to Matthew Renshaw, of course. And when there were low scoring matches, he still got his 30s, his 40s, his 50s. And when they were he hasn't been a part of high scoring matches. He's taken wickets. When the other team, like in India, he took wickets. And, perhaps they weren't helping Australia to win, because Australia would get flogged. But you could say he did his part. So if you look at a failure, as in, if you've got 11 people on the field, and let's count a failure as being 9, 10, 11. How many times has Glenn Maxwell been 9, 10, 11 on the Australian team? Or, let's say, worse than 18th in the whole match. So competing both teams. It's very few. You got 7. I think possibly 1 out of those 7 where he's actually failed. And I mean, it's a similar thing with Matthew Renshaw. You're probably looking at 2 failures out of 8. So 6 successes, or at least moderate successes, and 2 failures. That's for Renshaw. And for Maxwell, I think it's 6 and 1. So you shouldn't be dumping people that have been doing consistently quite good, average to good. And that's what we should be thinking, well, that's good. I mean, Mitchell Marsh, he's been the last several times. Sean Marsh has been the absolute worst several times. And that's where we're looking at failures. Now, if the team's winning, it doesn't matter. You can be the worst player every game. If the team's winning and you're still contributing, that's okay. But when the team's losing, you're looking at it a bit more. So instead of just last, you might look at last and second last, and last and second last and third last. So that's what we're looking at there. And like if you look in the Indian series, who was the worst for Australia? It was obviously Mitchell Marsh, but he only played 1 match. Beyond that was probably Aaron Finch and then Peter Hanscom. Now they were the 3 last, and they're the 3 that you're looking at, and you're going, I don't know if they should be there. Now the next worst after that, possibly Sean Marsh. Now he got dumped as well. So they're the players that we were leaving out from the Indian tour. They were the ones. Marnus Labuschagne only had 1 match. He wasn't that bad. He got 30 something. He didn't take any wickets, which is disappointing, considering you're supposed to take wickets. But he was just barely, not quite, kicked out. And if you look at it, I've ranked them. Your number 1 was Nathan Lyon, then Pat Cummins, then Tim Payne. That's your 3rd best. Then we'd probably look at Marcus Harris, number 4. Travis Head, number 5. See? So those players were doing fairly well. Then Josh Hazlewood, number 6. Mitchell Starc, number 7. Now you say, oh, well, they weren't very good bowlers. Well, they still took wickets and they were dangerous. So they're your top 7. Then you got Usman Khawaja, number 8. And then you got Sean Marsh, number 9. Now there's not much difference between Khawaja and Marsh, and they both did pretty badly. And you might say, well, that's unfair that we got rid of Marsh. Well, but Sean Marsh has had a bad overall record. He was terrible in UAE. Khawaja was great in UAE. Plus Khawaja also had a problem with his older brother, who was arrested not for being a terrorist, but for pretending that someone else was a terrorist, which is a pretty big deal. It's basically for fraud. So let's just say that he was arrested for fraud, and that's going to distract him, obviously. So I think we can give it a little bit of leeway. Plus he's returning from injury. Sean Marsh should have done better, and so I think it's fair enough to get rid of Marsh. It would have been fair enough to get rid of Labuschagne, and I think really they should have got rid of him and given Maxwell a turn. But the other hand, Maxwell hasn't been allowed to play first-class cricket. It's not because he's not good enough to get runs, it's because he hasn't been allowed to. And we've seen all the furor about this. It's completely unfair. But that's the fact, he hasn't been allowed to. Now, I also mentioned in my previous messages that I thought Jake Lehman and Curtis Patterson should have been given a go. And that's true too. I'm not changing my mind on that. But I suppose I'm saying that Glenn Maxwell has done more to earn his spot. And it's really quite unfair that he's not in there. Now, there's a lot of people really unfairly criticising him, saying, well, he's only a 1-day player. No, I mean, he's got like one of the highest first-class batting averages in Australia. So it's 41.1. Well, 41.0, sorry. 41.1 is Curtis Patterson. So he's above him, also not being considered. And above that, 49 is Will Bukowski. So they're pretty much the top 3 that we're not considering any of them. Well, sorry, we are considering Bukowski, we're not considering the other 2. So, and that sort of shows something. Why are we not considering these ones that have got good records? There's another guy called Matthew Short, not even been talked about. He's averaging 42. Chris Lynn, who we're also saying, well, he's a 1-day player, not even that. He's a T20 professional. Well, he averages 43 at first-class level. And, I mean, he does have a lot of injuries, and he's barely played first-class cricket lately, because he keeps getting injured right when the first-class season's on. But if he can get good and somehow do something about his injuries, he could be a test player. And, you know, Lynn and Maxwell have the record. There are some one-day specialists, T20 specialists, whatever, and you might be thinking Marcus Stoinis or Darcy Short might be those sort of categories. And that's another thing. Some people are talking about Stoinis in the test team. Get fucked. No way should he be anywhere near the test team. He just doesn't have the record. And I think some people saying that, it's sort of misunderstanding the formats. But Glenn Maxwell, on the other hand, does have a good record at first class level. And it is a genuine thing. And the problem is, and the main thing keeping him out, well, firstly, there's the one day, the idea that he's a short form specialist. And secondly, there's the idea that, well, we're